Hello, and welcome to the Brave New Weed podcast. And now, here's your host, Joe Dolce.
This is the Brave New Weed podcast. I'm your host, Joe Dolce, and I'm with Matthew Hendershot, co-producer, co-founder. Matthew.
Hey, how you doing, Joe? Good to be back on the show.
You know, this is a great episode because I've been trying to snag this one for years. It's with David Bronner, the CEO, the Chief Enlightenment Officer of Dr. Bronner Soap. Do you ever use Dr. Bronner Soap, Matthew?
I am a massive advocate of the Dr. Bronner's products. I've been a longtime user of the hemp and citrus soap. I actually have a little bit of a sensitive skin, so I have to. It took me a long time to find something that really worked well for me, but the Castile soap is absolutely great, so I'm a big advocate.
So David is not only the head of this company, but he's a major cannabis activist. He's an activist for legalization of psilocybin, and he's also leads one of the most constructive capitalist companies in the United States. So there's a lot to talk about. Stay tuned. I think you're going to really like this interview. So this episode is brought to you by Medical Cannabis Mentor, and we're offering a $100 discount on either of the courses that are up for Medical Cannabis Mentor. There's Cannabis Therapeutics, which is specifically made for healthcare providers. That includes pharmacists, nurses, doctors, all manner of medical professionals. And the second course is called Counterintelligence, which is really aimed at dispensary workers, people who want to get a leg up in the industry. So if you want to get the fundamental foundational course, the best foundational course, I can say that with authority because I'm one of the creators of it, to really get up to speed in evidence-based cannabis information and science, you can take one of these courses, and when you get $100 off if you enter the coupon code BRAVE. That's BRAVE. So what you do is you go to medicalcannabismentor.com and choose your course, and then input that coupon code BRAVE. Let me just tell you, there's 5 coupons that are available, and they're good until December 31st. So the first 5 people to get these will be able to get the discount. Again, that's medicalcannabismentor.com. Use the coupon code BRAVE.
Something interesting to note about this is if you are a Patreon patron of ours, then you have early access to this episode. So you may be hearing this a full 4 days before the public can get it. So if you are a Patreon patron and you want to jump on one of those coupons, you've got about a 4-day head start before the rest of the world can tune in. If we've passed the publication date and you're not a Patreon patron and you missed the opportunity, this might be good motivation for you to visit patreon.com/bravenewweed and become a patron so that you don't miss out next time we release coupons like this.
Before we get into the main interview, let's do a little recap of the news. Matthew, what have you been seeing lately?
Well, there's 2 big stories that I want to talk about this week on the news. The first of which is a landmark vote that took place on the House Judiciary Committee that moved along a bill to legalize cannabis in the United States. It's called the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, or MORE Act of 2019. It was introduced to the House Judiciary Committee. Sorry, let me say that again. It was introduced by the House Judiciary Committee Chairman, Jared Nadler, who, Joe, I think we should work to get on the show. He's a very interesting person that we should try and talk to. But it currently has 55 co-sponsors and was passed along. Now, don't get too excited, because it's likely that the Senate, which is currently Republican-controlled, is going to really drag their feet on taking any action on this. But it is a massive, massive indicator of this sea change that we've been witnessing about governmental and federal opinions about the legalization of cannabis.
That is one little bit of maybe good news. Let's see what else happens. What's the second story you've been watching?
Well, the second story is that there was a big to-do this week about cannabis stock prices kind of taking a little bit of a tank. And the analysts sort of point to an advisory that was issued by the FDA, which has some of the strongest language condemning the dangers of CBD use, particularly how it could cause damage to your liver. And this has caused a lot of companies, especially Canadian companies who are looking to really, really make a push into the American CBD market, to sort of falter in the stocks. And Joe, I know we talked about this before we hit record on this, and you had an opinion on this FDA statement about how it builds up in your liver.
It's not only my opinion. It's I spoke to a very well-known medical doctor and researcher who explained to me that a lot of this idea that CBD is harmful from the liver comes from the GW Pharma trials of Epidiolex. Mm-hmm. And Epidiolex was tested for epilepsy, okay? And if you're and seizure disorders, and if you're using that particular substance for this illness, you need to use a whole lot of it, much more than normal everyday users of CBD would use. And it comes in an oil base. That's how these tinctures were tested. And that has an effect on the liver. And that's that's the main reason. It's not, she was explaining that it's not the CBD itself, it's the carrier that is causing, and it's hardly damage, but
it's like lipoid fats slowing, or something.
It's a processing issue. So again, it's so frustrating because the lack of research, the lack of the FDA really understanding what's going on here is sort of contributing to all sorts of false concerns that may not be terribly important really in the big picture here. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I think that's worth bearing in mind, and I want to look into it more, and I plan to have her on the show in the next couple of months to talk about it.
Out of curiosity, Joe, do you know what sort of dosage an epilepsy patient would need of CBD for that treatment, just in comparison?
It was I did see the number. It was an enormous number of milligrams. I believe it was in the thousands.
Oh my!
Per day.
Okay.
So it was much higher than the 20 or 40 or 50 milligrams you might be using.
I see.
Don't quote me on that number, though. I want to go back and look at it, and I'll come back and we'll.
All right. Well, maybe this is something that we can put a pin in and bring an expert on a future show and discuss a little bit more in depth for our listeners.
Yeah, it's on my radar.
Indeed.
So as I said earlier in the cast, David Bronner is someone who I've had my eye on for a very long time. Not only has he turned Dr. Bronner's soap from a $4 million company into over $122 million a year, but he's also made major progress on issues regarding cannabis. He contributes. He's an advocate. He is, he's just supported hemp. He actually got arrested for planting hemp seeds on the front lawn of, I think it was the FDA several years ago, and I have to admire him for that. He's an activist who really puts his money where his mouth is. But not only that, he has really built a company. I mean, if you look at their public information, it tells you that over 50% of his company is minority and women, and many of those, close to 50%, are in management positions. They have a goal of being carbon neutral by 2023, and they're going to meet that goal. So they are really advocates for what David calls constructive capitalism, and I admire that greatly, and it makes me wonder why other companies with far more revenue aren't pursuing the same things with the same ambition and the same fervor that he is. So I was lucky enough to get him from his place in California, and this is our interview. And I hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
Let's do it.
Okay, here we are. This is David Bronner. Is your title Chief? No, you're Cosmic. Tell me your title again, please.
Yeah, Cosmic Engagement Officer of Dr. Bronner's.
I love that, David. Cosmic Engagement Officer of Dr. Bronner's. Thank you so much for joining on the Brave New Weed podcast. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I have to tell you, I used to work in the magazine industry, and many years ago, I used to work at Vogue, and some of the editors used to come up to me and say, "Oh, that Dr. Bronner soap, it's so disgusting. It's made from hemp." And I used to say, "Really? I really like it. I like the minty quality of it." And I think it's sort of a testament to your vision that it has become sort of a hippie thing into a very profitable and very productive company right now. Congratulations.
Yeah, no, thank you very much.
How did you do it? How did you turn from that hemp soap that nobody at Vogue liked into this very groovy, organic, very forward-looking brand?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess going back from the start,
Sure.
My granddad, Dr. Bronner, he himself was a third generation German Jewish soap maker. When he came of age in the kind of early last century, and was apprenticed in the mid 20s to another soap making family and earned his master's certificate, master of soap making, and went to work with his dad and two uncles that were running the family soap factory and enterprise, and had grown it to be pretty much the largest soap factory in Germany, or soap manufacturer. And the famous liquid soaps they made were in public washrooms all through Germany and in the Zeppelins. But my granddad was very activist early on. He was Zionist and was kind of in a lot of gotten a lot of clashes with his dad, especially. He was kind of wanting him to kind of keep the politics out of soap. And he emigrated to the U.S. in 1929, and not so much because of Nazism or fascism, that the eventual dimensions weren't apparent yet, but just the generational conflict. And he set up shop in Chicago and Milwaukee area, was a consultant to the U.S. soap industry, and married and had three kids, and in the 30s, and then also was becoming increasingly desperate with the rise of Hitler to get his family out. And his two sisters got out. One ended up in a kibbutz in Israel, and another became a professor of German and Hebrew at UMass Boston. But his parents, like a lot of bourgeois Jews, thought they were going to ride out the madness and stay till it was too late. The factory was Aryanized in 1940, and they were deported and killed shortly after. My granddad's wife also was sickly, and Paula, and she died in the same time frame, like 1944, when my dad was 2. So my granddad was going through a lot of immense tragedy, personal, and but somehow processing this, he was having massive breakthroughs and into the mystical core truth of all the faith traditions, that they're all pointing to the same transcendent source, and that we're all children of the same transcendent mystery, and that in a nuclear armed world, the next Holocaust, we're going to all perish if we don't figure out that unity across religious and ethnic divides. And he felt urgently called to promote this vision of peace, and went around the country lecturing, and on the side was selling his family's biodegradable natural soaps. And in the post-World War II era, this is the era of better living through chemistry, and the kind of shift to petrochemical bases for all kinds of industries, agricultural. In agriculture, this is the rise of pesticides and synthetic fertilizers. And in personal care, it was a lot of petrochemical-based surfactants and a turning away from natural moisturizers and cleansers like my family soap. And my granddad early on saw the problem of moving to this petroleum petrochemical basis and the ecological consequence, and stay true to the simple biodegradable formulas of his family. And as he was going around lecturing, he noticed that people were coming more to get this famous soap, or the soap had kind of spread. They're like, wow, this is a really good soap. And so he basically started downloading what he had to say on the labels of the soap, because people
he really did, didn't he? He would put entire tracks on those labels, right?
Yeah, I mean that's and he also another part of the story is he was actually in the McCarthy hysteria. He was interned and against his will put into a mental health institution from which he escaped, but not before he received shock treatments that he blamed his failing eyesight and eventually going blind in the 60s. But we like to say our label was designed by a blind man, a blind seer, but he didn't know exactly how busy the labels were getting. But with the rise of the counterculture and a generation, the Silent Spring and the widespread awareness of the ecological catastrophe of industrial, rapacious capitalism, just exploiting the earth for resource and the ecological, just ecosystems in collapse, communities being ripped apart. This generation in a war machine that wouldn't stop, the generation that dropped out and turned on, they really grooved to the soap that you could, wash your hair, the dishes of the dog by the side of the river and not worry about it and kind of groove on the message of peace. And my granddad, he ran the company as a nonprofit religious organization. The soap is there to sell the labels more than vice versa.
Okay, that explains those labels then.
Yeah, and so anyways, fast forwarding here to now, so we're just the era of Vogue. What's her name? Bobby Ross. I mean, she's a high end makeup artist. Her favorite soap is Bronner's, and she's definitely a kind of Vogue superstar. And that I might have her name wrong, Bobby something. But anyways, the trend really is that we've continued to leverage the company and in my granddad's vision of promoting a more peaceful, sustainable world. I mean,
were you talking about Bobby Brown?
Yeah, Bobby Brown. I'm sorry,
yeah,
Bobby Brown.
She's pretty big. She's a lover of. So that's sort of interesting. I mean, there you were. You're born in the 1970s, and you're growing up with a soap that wasn't really considered. It wasn't like a big seller, was it? I mean, I believe I read that you under you turned it from a $4 million revenue company into $120 million. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we're going to probably cross 130 this year.
I mean, that's sort of amazing. How does, I don't want to make this podcast all about soap, but I mean, you guys, it's always been made from hemp. Is that correct?
No, and that's part of the answer to the question is the addition of hemp was the first real activist. Like when I kind of came into the company, I was like, I was fueled by some pretty intense psychedelic experiences in Amsterdam in '95. I intersected the Cannabis Cup then. My squat. There are people who are part of our church, which was a church in Arkansas formed with cannabis as a sacrament in 1993. And the feds busted it up. And there are members in my squat that were basically facing 10 years to life if they set foot back in the U.S. And I really woke up to the kind of religious dimension of the war on drugs. Like it was a war on the sacrament of my people, that as a proxy to go after not just the counterculture, but people of color. And, just a kind of racist, policy at its core. And, that cannabis and psychedelic sacraments are really crucial. It was crucial in my awakening. I became vegan and just kind of woke up to the disaster of Western consumption on the planet, really understood what my granddad was talking about and, just the beauty at the heart of all the faith traditions when they're not taking themselves literally, but when they do, that's when you get all these, massive problems of intolerance and disrespect and demonization of other peoples and their religions. But when you're relating in a fluid way to the mystery that they all point to, then we're all one, and it's about the one true religion of love. So, coming into Bronner's, I really vowed to run it the way my granddad had set it up, which was as an activist engine. And we were in bankruptcy. The IRS had disagreed with his tax-exempt self-designation as a nonprofit religious organization. And so we had to pay these huge amounts of back taxes and penalties. But my dad and mom and uncle reorganized as a for-profit but we had that nonprofit DNA at the heart of everything we do. And so coming in, like one of the first things we did, or, as I kind of stepped up and, my granddad died in 97, on the same day my daughter was born, March 7th. And then my dad was diagnosed with lung cancer and died a year later, and just had a very intense year with him, kind of downloading the ropes. And I'd actually come up working with him in a separate company that we did all kinds of stuff, including firefighting foam and special effects snow foam, and just a lot of fun stuff like that. But anyway, so when I stepped in, we set a 5-to-1 cap. I could kind of see what the future was going to be, and we said,
explain a 5-to-1 cap, please.
So all family executives will make our compensation will total no more than the lowest paid position at Bronner's, a fully vested position. So there's a 5-year vesting process, but we make no more than 5 times our lowest paid warehouse employee. And the idea being that all profits then, in addition, that we don't need for the company or the business, we then dedicate to the causes and charities we support. And beyond just using our profits in that way, just the business itself, we were leveraging it as an activist engine. And the first thing we did was incorporate hemp seed oil in 99 into the soaps as a base ingredient. And the reason being that hemp seed oil is really high in omega-3. And as far as soap making goes, that means it's a triple unsaturated 18 carbon length fatty acid, and is very emollient and smooth. Just made the soap much less drying, the after feel much smoother. And then also was, of course, a way of kind of engaging on the hypocrisy of the drug war that would schedule a non-drug agricultural crop as a Schedule I drug. And also is a sustainable, grows like a weed. You don't need a lot of pesticides and herbicides to grow this, versus like cotton, which takes like 25% of the world's herbicide to grow.
No, it's an absolutely brilliant and forward-looking move. I have to commend you on that. I want to come back to it, but I want to ask you, if you mind, what's your salary if it's 5 times the company's lowest paid workers?
Well, the base worker at 5 years is making 20 something. So I'm at like my base is like 2, whatever, let's say 40. Is that right? I think 230, 240. Let's see what I got to do some simple math here, but yeah, I think our lowest paid is like our base salary is like around 45,000. And then there's a nice bonus that everyone gets. That's all proportional, up to 25%. And we do a very generous profit sharing kind of retirement plan. No deductible health care, child care subsidy, free organic plant-based lunch with the grass-fed beef and pasture-raised chicken we subsidize for the taco truck outside. So we do a lot of cool things, and we're about to make Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, company holiday. That's our newest idea.
I think I want to come work for you. I really admire the way you've pursued I'll call it conscientious capitalism. What do you call it?
Yeah, constructive capitalism.
Constructive capitalism. No, I really admire it, and I know you're very transparent about all your financial dealings. You're very transparent about the sort of the gender ratios of your workforce. It's very impressive. Did you get any pushback from this when you were instituting these policies?
Not so much on the employee. My family's pretty aligned in kind of what we're about. Hemp with a little more of a difficult sell, I would say, but it really was the foundational kind of fight, because we got into this big fight with the DEA that with under Bush, and after 9/11, the DEA went nuts on medical marijuana dispensaries. It shut down, said all hemp is now Schedule I, and we got in this big protracted fight with DEA, initiated in 2001, and we won a clean victory in 2004. And it was the first time DEA got knocked back. And in the course of that fight, we really kind of brought a lot of the senior leadership in Bronner's was kind of forged in that battle. And just like some really high level allies plugged in to just, make that happen. And then just kind of continuing on the sustainable regenerative path of certifying our supply chains first organic and then fair trade, and continuing to fight, funding medical marijuana, the Americans for Safe Access, Steph Scherer's amazing group, and then all the different ballot measure fights.
David, what was it like planting hemp seeds on the lawn of the DEA?
Yeah, I felt like it was. I had a special ceremonial shovel made. It said, "I got it." It says hemp planting, October 2009, DA headquarters. American farmers shall grow hemp again. Reefer madness will be buried. And it was like driving a stake into the heart of the vampire. And
were you arrested for that?
Yeah, and this was in honor of Jack Herer, who had just had a stroke, and was under, Obama had done nothing. The same drug warriors and same policies were in place, and we were just getting really frustrated. But yeah, we were arrested, but released the same day.
And then you had another moment, which I love, in 2012, right? Didn't you lock yourself in a cage in front of the White House?
Right. Again,
what were you doing in that cage?
I was being free, and I was freely harvesting my hemp seeds from my hemp plants and making some oil to spread on toast and kind of yell at Obama and everyone around about why is my family sending, hundreds of thousands of dollars to Canadian farmers in the middle of the worst recession ever. It's like, the U.S. hemp market is the biggest in the world, and we were just handing it to the Canadians and the Chinese and the Europeans. So, it was just basically a way of like highlighting just the ridiculousness of the situation. That I was challenging the feds that they couldn't prove that my hemp plants were marijuana. And so they pled me out for obstructing traffic. I went to jail for like a day. I think effective advocacy, like instead of marketing, we just basically use our profits to invest in fighting for the causes we believe in. And that's, hemp legalization, cannabis legalization, psychedelic medicine integration, raising the minimum wage and income inequality, different animal welfare groups, and then, crucially, regenerative organic agriculture. Like, how do we farm our food and ingredients for our soaps and fibers for our clothes? How do we do that in a way that replicates nature? When you look at a natural ecosystem, there is no synthetic chemical inputs. It's all self-regenerating. And, we need to transition. 1/3 of the Earth's landscape is under industrial agricultural mismanagement, and it's a disaster. And, if we can transition that to farm in nature's image, then, we have a real shot of reversing climate change and, living in a much more sustainable, balanced way with the earth.
So you just mentioned a whole bunch of causes, all of which I'm deeply sympathetic with and support as well. But let's talk about the last one, which is the disaster of 1/3 of the earth being under industrial production method. How are you an optimist about this? How do you see this ever playing out in a good way? Because I'm feeling so dark about it right now. It causes me great despair, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, man, for sure. And I guess I am optimistic about, that the solutions are in hand. Obviously we need to decarbonize our economy, and we need to get an administration and political leadership that's going to, make that happen. But we also need to be transitioning our agriculture. We need to be lowering the amount of meat we eat. And I'm in solidarity with the high animal welfare pasture-based operators. And, again, looking at a natural ecosystem, there is such a thing as a sustainable balance of animal and plant life in both a wild ecosystem and in a farming ecosystem, but it's at a much, much lower level. And right now we need to get all these, like, it's just such a ethical and ecological disaster of like what we're doing to the food animals and these, rotting away in cages, and best day of their life is their last when they're put out of their misery. But if we can integrate them, and so I'm in partnership with Patagonia, the big clothing company, and leading animal welfare, soil health, and fair labor organizations. We've launched what we're calling the regenerative organic standard, taking organic as a baseline, but then layering on the best of the animal welfare, fair labor, and soil health movements into a single standard. And we're in the pilot phase, and we're about to launch next year. And we have a lot of hope that this isn't going to happen overnight. It's a generational fight to transition. But you look at countries like Austria, and they're now 25% organic, and the change can come quick. And if we just get like a critical mass, and I guess the other side of that equation is integration of psychedelic allies that can just really help reconnect people to nature, and enable a much more eco-mindedness and awareness about how our consumption choices impact the earth, and that if each of us see our plate as a farm and our knife as a butchering knife and our fork as a pitchfork, and take responsibility for what our section of the garden looks like, what does our farm look like? Are we supporting farmers doing it right? And as that consciousness hopefully filters out sooner versus later, and it's not overnight, but the hope is that and then us we've been inspired by other players and are now pioneering, like for example in Ghana we're growing palm oil, or we're working with 1,000 smallholders who produce palm, and palm generally is rightly viewed as a disaster in the way it's grown.
Evil crop, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not inherent to the crop. It's inherent to the corporate industrial management and way it's done. And they're ripping up rainforest in Borneo and Indonesia and displacing orangutan habitat, ripping up wetland habitat and displacing communities. And it's just a disaster. But the same thing's happening with soy plantations in the Amazon and, for animal feed. And, it's not about, in hemp even, you can grow hemp in a not good way. I mean, there's, it definitely lends itself to a regenerative organic management system, but there's definitely a lot of farmers growing hemp in not a very ecological way. And it's the point is that it's about your management, about, are you choosing a regenerative organic agricultural management approach or an industrial chemical intensive approach? And regenerative organic is very knowledge intensive. Like, you need to really know what you're doing. You need to have a smart crop rotation. You have to have, perimeter plantings for pollinators and predator insects to control your pests. Be controlling your weed pressure smart. And, industrial agriculture, it's all like very like low level knowledge. You just like blast a shit ton of herbicide on your genetically engineered crops, engineered to withstand huge amounts of weed killer. And you walk away and call it a day. But that's just leading to these monoculture deserts. This is, disaster of just completely dead soil, wild ecosystems and you just collapse because these, pesticides and chemicals and fertilizers, they don't stop killing on the farm. They just keep killing as they get out into nature. And so anyway, like with regenerative organic, it's, you're farming in nature's image, and in our supply chains, which includes palm and tree crops like coconut and olive. So the equivalent to a regenerative system and a perennial tree cropping system is called dynamic ag forestry. And it's where you intercrop complementary crops that replicate a wild like forest ecosystem. You'll have tall trees and mid-level trees and bushes and ground cover. And when you do that in a cropping system, like what we're doing in Ghana, where we take tall palm trees and then you have mid-level cocoa and bananas, and then you got cassava as your ground cover, and you plant that in a correct spacing, understanding how the canopy heights are going to fill in with lots of pruning. And if you do that correct, you'll actually, your yield, your biomass and actual productive yield is twice what you would get in a monoculture block of those 4 crops in the same area. And doing it that way, you minimize weed and pest pressure. You're sequestering huge amounts of biomass into the soil. So you're sequestering carbon, and you're boosting yields and income by a huge amount, and restoring rural economies and livelihoods and all that. So it's like win-win-win. So, but unfortunately our agricultural policy is dominated by the chemical pesticide industry, the Monsantos and Dow DuPonts and Syngenta, Chem China, whatever their new name is. And, Dow DuPont merged and they have some new name. But anyways, like our agricultural policy is dominated by these agricultural interests. They control, who's appointed. They buy off both parties and the regulators and EPA, USDA, and FDA. Major academic institutions that are on the payroll. And yeah, it's definitely a not great situation, but there is a grassroots kind of movement and it's really catching fire and we're part of it. We just see it growing. And so I guess I'm cautiously optimistic that, as the kind of planetary circumstance becomes ever more dire and people are really starting to wake up to that, really making that connection that it's not just about decarbonizing the economy, but, we really need to be thinking about how we grow and consume our food and, just what, just the impact that agriculture has. It's basically we can terraform the earth one way or the other. Right now we're terraforming it in a really bad direction. But, rather than these science fiction scenarios of, whatever kind of terraforming, if just everybody starts to take responsibility and eat, in a conscious way and support their farmers that are doing it right. And then, giving them not that big of a premium to be able to take care of their land in a good way and their livestock and their workers. And, things can really start to shift.
David, you studied biology at Harvard, right?
Yeah, I did.
Did you learn any of these concepts in your studies?
I didn't. I would say I didn't really. I guess I learned. I learned some good foundational stuff, and I guess how to kind of think about stuff to an extent. But it wasn't really till the hemp fight. Well, it wasn't really till the big psychedelic experiences that I was like, whoa! I really need to figure out what's going on, kind of around.
Let's talk about psychedelic experiences because I've been having some profound ones lately, and obviously you're open to talking about it, right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
So let's talk about how it has helped you find meaning and purpose. That's a big question. I know it's big, but I don't know where to start that conversation because often when you listen to people talk about psychedelics, it's like listening to people speak about their dreams, which is very personal and not necessarily universal, right? So can you step back a little from your psychedelic experiences and tell me, how has it changed your consciousness? How's that for a small question early in the morning?
Yeah, it is. I'm going to find something.
Let me break it down for you a little bit more. Sorry, but so what substances are we talking about? What are the psychedelic substances that you're?
Oh, I'm fans of all.
Okay, me too. Go on. Anything new coming your way?
Yeah. Well, I'm about to go do Iboga in Costa Rica, and that's a real big one. Ibogaine.
Mm-hmm.
But the ones that really blew me apart when I was in a trance club in Amsterdam in '95 was an LSD, MDMA, and not that high of a dose of LSD, but just I don't know, died 5 different ways into the light and love at the heart of existence, just kind of like surrendering kind of my small self to the way bigger love and that somehow is at the heart of existence in the midst of the suffering and absurdity. I remember coming back, maybe just one part, because you're totally right about how things get lost in translation. But coming back from the light, one, I was like, all right, God, so I'm here dancing in this club, and right now there's this rape and there's murder and there's all kind of horrible shit going down all around the world. What's up? And I was microscoped into nothing. And just the self of all, like just the allness, like was just so mega and beyond any explanation or justification or anything. Just living and dying and being in the ecstasy and the agony and just all of it. And that there wasn't, it was just what is the self of all is the all. And there is no explanation. And then I saw Jesus with his back to me, just kind of like stepping into the maelstrom and just like calm and just compassion and grace, just not trying to explain it or complain about it, but just stepping up. And I was like, man, I want to be like that. I want to be like that guy. And, that was like, I want to, just get down and I want to serve and just help it, shit can be awesomer and get better.
So Jesus is your role model, or was in 1995?
Yeah, man. And I was raised Protestant. It's like complex family history, but I said the Shema in Hebrew and English growing up, along with my Christian prayers, but rejected all. By the time I was 12, was like, if God so loved the world, why did He send His one only Son to this one spot? What about the Chinese / the billions of other planets? And but then in biology and a kind of materialistic download, was also kind of pretty inadequate. And I guess another, a real early experience I had with mushrooms was, looking down at my arm and seeing like, wow, at a quantum level, I'm like not different from the world. Like I'm in one continuum with it. And when I eat and I poop, the world's like pouring through me. Like it's just energy. I'm like a river of energy. And I'm not even the same stuff like year to year. I'm just, it's just like I'm one with the world, and just having that unity experience of like kind of the small self, just a much more expansive sense of self, and that the world is living, I'm part of a living magical reality, that our kind of superficial ego consciousness, has its whatever take on things, but there's like so much more going down. And so, yeah. So, and I'm very much on the all one love tip of my granddad and respect, the Bodhisattva vow, and, that's the most, very similar, that self-sacrificing love and compassion that, regenerates the world. That's, common in most faith traditions. The Bodhisattva vow is really beautiful. I renounce my own enlightenment until all beings caught in suffering are liberated. That's, and vows to reincarnate, and that, it's more an idea, not, I don't, I think the problem with religions is when they take themselves, literally. But if you take the Joseph Campbell, archetypal, they're all archetypes, cultural inflections and refractions of, archetypal divine truth that, that can open to that. But when you make idols, when you close them down and look at them as like, this is the one way, it's like, no, now it's a closed, dead idol that, you go to war over with, other fundamentalists, and, that's a disaster. But
so one of the things that interests me about you is that you're able to take a lot of these revelations that many people just use solipsistically and apply them to the world. Maybe it's because you run a $120 million company. I'm not sure. But you recently contributed, what was it, $150,000 to the Oregon Ballot initiative to legalize psilocybin therapy. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's great. Did you do the same in Denver? Did you also support that initiative?
Yeah, so we gave $10K to Decrim Denver, and Kevin Matthews is he's awesome. He's gone out now to form Spore, and
I don't know who Kevin Matthews is. Who's that?
Oh, he was the chief petitioner in Denver, and he was part of a team of awesome people in Denver, to just really break it open, right? I think it was, and it was actually, they won on my birthday, May 7th, which was
happy birthday,
a beautiful, beautiful gift. And yeah, so the decrim nature movement's on fire. Then Oakland decriminalized not just mushrooms, but all entheogenic plant allies. And now, there's a Decrim Chicago, Decrim Nature Chicago, Decrim Nature New York, Dallas. Like, just the movement's on fire. I just got off a call with activists in DC about doing a Decrim Nature measure there. But we're really excited by the Oregon effort. We feel that they're taking the kind of therapeutic paradigm that the Hopkins and NYU and UCLA researchers have really pioneered and perfected, that is showing such huge promise with treating, people, with debilitating end of life anxiety or treatment resistant depression or alcoholism or other substance use disorders. Psilocybin assisted therapy is showing such amazing promise. And what Oregon's doing is basically taking that model, but, rather than so that those clinical studies right now are supporting an FDA approval process for psilocybin, but that's going to be restricted on the other side to people with qualifying diagnosis of like major depressive disorder. And, obviously all of us can benefit from psilocybin therapy. Like we all can benefit from therapy, period. And psilocybin assisted therapy is just so much better. And, all of us, excluding, schizophrenic or bipolar disorders, the people suffering with those, it's not a good idea. But pretty much everyone who's not contraindicated should have access to the therapy. And so in Oregon, they're putting forward that therapeutic model, but in a community-based kind of approach. You have licensing of training of therapists and, proper facilitation of the experience and, preparation before, integration after. But outside of the medical pharma model. So
I think it's great. Yeah, I think it has to get out. I mean, as much as I respect doctors, I think it's a very restrictive model, especially for plant-based medicines. And I don't think they're any more aware or any more the keepers of our safety than anyone else. How do you feel about that?
You can say that one more time. You don't think they're the...
Well, I don't think medical doctors have any more particular training in the use of plant substances than, as a matter of fact, than almost anyone else.
No, they might even be the worst.
And to make them the gatekeepers of this, especially given their, what's the word I want to use? Their, let's say, aggressive embrace of all sorts of pharmaceuticals. I'm not really sure they're the best at this. And again, no offense to doctors. I love doctors and they have helped me in innumerable instances. I'm just not sure they should be the stewards of this.
No, I mean, that's a really key point, right? I mean, that like the people who are the most qualified facilitators oftentimes have chosen a different career path than, going to med school and getting an MD degree. That said, I think what's really great about what MAPS is doing with MDMA assisted therapy for PTSD and then the efforts on the psilocybin side is that the therapists have to experience the medicine themselves. So even if you are like, let's just say a kind of, rationalistic, overly like kind of Western, whatever mindset that, having a powerful and the psilocybin especially, I mean, these are not small doses. I mean, the therapeutic dose is a pretty large psilocybin dose.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to have a life-changing experience that's going to really like help you be a way better therapist. So that said, I mean, absolutely. I think that many of the most qualified facilitators are working outside of the medical system. They're underground. And so what Oregon is doing is basically taking that underground therapist community above ground and, just in bringing, licensing and training or basically a system of holding people accountable. If there's like some bad actors, there's a way of dealing with that.
When is the Ballot initiative? When does it happen?
Well, it's so, and this is going to be very important to note is that there is in parallel to the psilocybin therapy effort and it's going to happen in November. So next on the November 2020 ballot, at the same time we're voting on our next president, which, I mean, that ballot and that electorate is going to be the best in a generation. Trump, if nothing else, is going to drive an incredible millennial voter turnout, and all kinds of progressive measures are going to have much better chance of passing than otherwise. So it's a real opportune time for progressive ballot measures. I wish we didn't have the underlying reason, but it is what it is. And hopefully we get Trump out and we pass a slate of really progressive measures. So not only is it psilocybin therapy, but broad-based Portugal-style decriminalization is going to be on the ballot in Oregon and in Washington.
Amazing. Oh, really? Just by the states, they're going to stop arresting people for drug-related offenses?
Yeah, it's treatment. It's basically the drug abuse. Let's see, Drug Abuse Treatment and Recovery Act. So DATRA is in Oregon.
It's harm reduction. It's the most sensible approach to all sorts of problems, isn't it?
It's and then Portugal showed the way, right? They had a huge heroin epidemic, and realized criminalizing people in the throes of addiction was not helping, and decriminalized possession and ramped up treatment services, and that's obviously that's the solution, and they've showed it. So now Oregon and Washington are gonna blaze the path, and it's perfect to have psilocybin therapy alongside decriminalization and treatment, not jail, because psilocybin therapy is so has such promise for alcoholism and drug abuse problems.
Yeah, I was at the last MAPS conference, which was held in New York, and there's a lot of really impressive researchers getting up to really talk about their studies and their results. And it is, I have to say, it is like entering another world, because the results are impressive and the risks are fairly minimal, and the therapy is well articulated. Like we're still learning how to use these substances, but I was blown away time after time after time, because I had never really heard a formal research presentation, a whole group of research presentations over 2 days like this. So it was very impressive, I have to say. Have you used psilocybin or other psychedelics to counter any medical conditions? I mean, I know you don't have to reveal your own medical conditions to me,
man,
but do you have personal experience there?
Yeah, well, I like to say I'm on the spectrum of everything. So yeah. So man, it's definitely been helpful in helping me heal up and just be more centered. And I think part of the especially with Thomas Shree Eckert, the husband and wife therapist team that are the chief petitioners in Oregon. I mean, they're just really eloquent in that they just see like the whole way pharma has co-opted psycho or mental health and mental health care, and we have these like narrow diagnoses, and then here's your pill for it. None of it's just not working, and people are complex, and mental health is complex, and it's not like about a simple like, okay, we got to fit you into this diagnostic criteria or that one. I mean, it's it's a very complex interrelated deal, individually and community and socially, and the way psychedelic medicine works, it just kind of really kind of gets real deep in there, and it kind of helps really difficult experiences and emotions and patterns of behavior and thought, to just kind of reset and get perspective and be able to choose just like, much more healthy and constructive ways of being and living and loving in the world. And,
David, that's great. Thank you. I want to ask you, this is the Brave New Weed podcast, and ostensibly our topic is cannabis. I'm not a fan of grouping all substances under this broad category of drugs, because I actually see them as very different players and very different with very different uses in the world. So let's talk about cannabis a little bit. Are you using cannabis these days?
I smoke every day, and I think cannabis is the number one ally. I mean, I don't want to have to pick between all of them, but
no, I'm not asking you to. By the
way, no, I know.
There's
but
no list of priorities here.
But if I had to, I mean, that's the daily check-in. That's the daily kind of elevation and just ally, I think.
How do you use cannabis? Do you use it to work? Do you use it to unwork? Do you use it to emote? Do you use it how?
I use it to generally after work. I might have like a low level during work, but generally not.
Are you smoking? Are you using edibles?
I do both.
A little detail.
Yeah, I like oftentimes I'll just do some light edible. Actually, generally like 2 to 5 milligrams, kind of on the lower side.
I'm the same. How about that? See, I think this is a conversation that doesn't happen often enough. Like, how do we really use this? I mean, Lester Grinspoon started this conversation back in the 1970s or 80s. No, in the 90s. I'm sorry. He started like one of those old chat groups about how do people use cannabis. And I was reading them, and it's amazing because the variety of experience is so vast. So I do want to hone in on how you use it, and I'll shut up and you can tell me.
Yeah. So, just a little, edible, kind of get that baseline in there. And often that's what I'll roll with. But, I guess more often than not, I'll smoke, some kind of sativa. We got the Brother David. So I guess kind of really focusing on our cannabis efforts here.
Tell people what Brother David is, please.
Yeah. So, I guess first off, in the 2020 cycle, So Brother David's is our not-for-profit brand platform to advocate for Sun and Earth certification. And Sun and Earth is the equivalent of regenerative organic in the cannabis space. Basically means your cannabis is grown in the soil, under the sun, no chemicals, with fair labor. Celebrating the farmers that are really doing it right and growing our medicine in a way that's regenerative and taking care of the land. Their workers are being treated right. It's not, what we saw with legalization is that the rapid commodification, industrialization of cannabis, these huge indoor corporate grows, very fossil fuel intensive with to fuel all the lights, and very chemical, pesticide and fertilizer intensive. And it's just not the right way to be growing the medicine in a sustainable, regenerative way. And, So Sun and Earth is basically the kind of mirrors regenerative organic, and because of federal prohibition, organic, USDA organic, that program is not accessible to cannabis farmers. So Sun and Earth is a standard that regenerative farmers came together, along with ourselves. Flocano was at the table, and just developed a really high bar standard. And the not-for-profit Brother David's line is basically celebrating these top shelf, beautiful flowers that these farmers are growing, but reinvesting the profits back into certifying, helping doing like regenerative farmer trainings, certification costs, and then funding efforts to lower the regulatory burden on small farmers. And we want to see, as a not-for-profit brand, we want to see all our competitors adopt Sun and Earth. We're not about being exclusive to our brand at all. I mean, the whole point of it being not-for-profit is that we just want to communicate in the store to the consumer, to the trade, to the bud tenders about Sun and Earth certification. And then another big part of the profits are going to go into the 2020 election cycle, where we want to win 6 red states. We want to end prohibition in 6 red states, and we're coordinating with New Approach, PAC, and Marijuana Policy Project. And we have this idea of 1% for the plant, although because it's modeled on the 1% for the planet that Yvon Chouinard of Patagonia pioneered. And the idea is you dedicate 1% of your net rev to enviro causes for the 1% for the planet. 1% for the plant is you take 1% of your net rev and you dedicate that to any prohibition in the 2020 cycle. So Dr. Bronner's, we're going to do 1%. So that 1% of 130 million is 1.3 million. So 1.3 we're going to put into ending cannabis prohibition in 6 red states, with the idea that if we can end prohibition and get a critical number of Republican senators, we can end this federally in 2021.
That's great. That is great. How can other companies join that effort? Can you tell me?
Yeah, well, we're just right now it's in concept, but I'll be talking at the Emerald Cup on December 15th, and we should have the program pretty fleshed out by that point, and hopefully get a website. We're not going to call it 1% for the plant, and people didn't like Smoke the Vote. I thought Smoke the Vote was pretty fun, but they felt it wasn't serious enough, and I agree with that. So we're going to come up with some cool name that's serious enough. But But the program's going to roll out here in the coming, month or so. We want to get
here is California. Is that what you mean? Here?
What's that?
Here is California. Is that what you're saying?
Oh no, I meant in general space and time. Like it'll be. We actually want nationwide buy-in on the program. Absolutely not just California. And we feel the most. Obviously these giant companies that are, profiting the most. Really need to be stepping up, and that's kind of what we're challenging. These big companies that obviously stand to gain hugely from ending prohibition to really come to the table, because generally it's been philanthropist money has been driving the cause, and we need to be focusing now on broad-based Portugal-style decriminalization and psilocybin therapy and decrim nature, and it's that philanthropist money needs to be moving on. And it's time for the industry to really step up and, take care of things. So that's what we're trying to do here with that program.
Good. How are you going to get Shell Oil and Mobil to get on board with this one?
Well, it would be it would be the big cannabis companies, the big SMOs, is the main target. We want to get the
multi-state operators. You mean?
The multi-state operators. We want to get the those guys, regardless of who they're backed by, and we're not going to be all sun and earth police on anybody. We just want to, for this cause, we just want everybody coming to the table. Basically, if you're, a company making money, and we're saying that, and we know it's a hard time right now as far as the capital markets drying up, and it's but the investors that have like a 5-year, view or longer that are backing these companies, if they put in the name of these companies, that'll count. So we're, basically gonna, ask companies like, okay, even if you don't want to contribute from your working cap reserves, like we want you to get your investors together and have us pitch this, and they can contribute, in the name of the company, and that'll count.
That's great. Have any of them come on board yet, or is it pre-rollout? It's
really pre. I mean, there's preliminary discussions happening as we speak, but it's not. In the next month, we should have hopefully a critical mass of some big companies, and just really create a the critical momentum.
So good. So let us know if we can be of any assistance to you here at our very small and humble podcast. Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you, man. And yeah, just it's good to have the platform here to talk about it. The overall raise is 31 million if we fight in Ohio too. If we don't fight in Ohio, it'll be like 20 million. And I think states like South Dakota and Missouri are on deck.
I was going to ask you, what are the 6 red states you're looking to?
I don't have the battle map in front of me. It's, MPP, a new approach, have kind of identified the states that are ready to go. They've done like extensive polling and message testing, and feel really confident. It's Missouri, South Dakota. I'm blanking on the others, but
we'll come up with it. We'll get it out before we run this podcast. We'll figure that out. Okay.
Yeah, I can send you the map here. So
that'd be great. Let's go back to the conversation though of how else you use cannabis. How has it been an ally to you, or recently? Just even a practical example. They don't have to even speak abstractly.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's just like appreciating the shifting out of like kind of the go mode of the day to, just relaxing and, getting down with the flowers and music and food and my partner and surfing. It's just, just appreciating the magic miracle of life and just all the radness that's going on all the time that we're getting our whole busy go mode. We're just not paying any attention to. And then also like, I feel it is very helpful professionally. I think, in that more state of reverie, just the kind of insights and, kind of creative flow you can get into. And, oftentimes I have really good ideas.
That's what I want to ask you. What was the last or the most powerful sort of interesting idea that actually came true, or that actually withstood scrutiny in the light of day that you had while using cannabis?
I mean, it happens all the time,
Good.
I almost don't think about it because it's just like, it's just like, uh, but, I mean, in a way, it's like, especially in the intense part of the initial kind of rush, or there's, I mean, especially when smoking, but I mean, it's almost like an inventory. I can do like a kind of a scan inventory, like overlook things, or just things will come up. Um, yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to pinpoint something, exactly. But I'll tell you what. Here's something I give like as a real good example of like oftentimes I'll be in an argument. I mean, luckily I get in less stupid arguments as I'm proceeding on my path, but still happens semi routinely with my partner or whatever. And and I remember like I'll go out to like smoke my pipe, and I'll be like, man, I'm right. I don't want to be wrong. I'm right. But I know as soon as I hit my pipe that I'm gonna disinvest from my ego, from myself, gonna get a more global view, and it's like, oh shit, Mia's got a point. I should go apologize. And like, and it's pretty magical in that way of just helping, and just kind of disinvest from like kind of whatever moods and whatever stuff that you can caught in. And, and just, I think it's really good for like relational dynamics. Yeah. You know what? I bet 1% for the plant came out of I was probably high when I thought of that. I'm pretty much sure. So
good. Well, I want to encourage you to keep smoking and coming up with other good and revolutionary ideas, because obviously the planet needs it. And I think corporate America could use a good dose of it also, by the way.
Oh yeah, 100%. The healing of the nations, and and that's like a big thing. Is like how like I'm really psyched about the lower dose, higher CBD products and flowers, and making it much more accessible to a much broader swath of the population. Because I think everybody can benefit, and that's like one of the most beautiful gifts you can give anybody is, figuring out how they can find a relationship to this medicine and have it in their life.
I love talking to you. I hope we talk again. I want to see the map from
the battle map. Yeah, you got it.
Love to hear what you have to say at the Emerald Cup. I hope you stay in touch. I hope you come back and talk to us again. Thank you so much.
Yeah, right on, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Joe, we've talked about psychedelics on the show a couple times, and it's really sort of outside of our purview because we do want to stay focused on the legal cannabis space. But there is a lot of great and interesting medical science out there about these psychedelics, about psilocybin, and even MDMA to a certain extent in regards to depression, post-traumatic stress, end-of-life preparation and care, all of these things that just really fit into a higher quality of life. So even though it's not exactly where we focus in this podcast, I find it always incredibly interesting to meet and to hear from people who are expanding their thought processes into this realm and this area as well.
Well, I think the thing to bear in mind is that the history of cannabis prohibition parallels the history of psychedelic prohibition. I mean, it was the same level of disinformation by government. Remember, acid is going to fry your brain. It's going to make you jump out of windows. It's going to cause genetic defects to your children. And again, LSD has been in circulation since the 1940s, and there is no evidence of this whatsoever. And all the research on the things you just mentioned, depression, PTSD, end of life, has been incredibly suppressed over the years. And thanks to advocates like Bronner and like Rick Doblin, who runs MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies.
Yeah, Rick's an old friend.
This stuff is coming back to the fore. And I think that's why it's interesting, because the history, the parallels are so relevant and so undeniable. and people who are following this stuff are really changing their minds in every way.
Yeah. I mean, it's just really motivating for me that and inspiring for me that we can continue to do this podcast, because even if we are focused more on the cannabis space than in this bigger world, it is our mission to dispel fear and share actual science and information. And I think that knowing that people like that are out there in other areas as well, whether that be psychedelics or other chemical compounds or nature medicine, everything like that, I think we just need more people out there in the world who are working to dispel fear and actually spread honest and functional and useful information.
So, speaking of supporting this podcast, I want to make another pitch for people to support us on Patreon. You can do it for as little as $1 a month.
Also, for anyone who is out there and who does make their way over to the Patreon page, don't forget the Patreon patrons get early access to the show. And this show in particular is brought to you by Medical Cannabis Mentor. Those 5 $100 coupons are going to go first come, first serve. And if you have early access to the show, that means you also have early access to the coupon. So, if you aren't a Patreon patron and you missed out this time, get over to patreon.com/bravenewweed and become a patron today, so that the next time we release a batch of coupons or special offers, you are first in line to get it. To sign up to become a patron and support the show, all you have to do is go to patreon.com/bravenewweed, select a tier at which you would like to support the show, as low as $1 a month, and sign up to become a patron today.
Come back again soon, folks. Our next episode is actually going to be a great interview with 2 of the judges of the Emerald Cup. This is the Harvest Festival in California. It's the best cannabis festival in the world, as far as I'm concerned. Small opinion there. And the judges spend 6 weeks investigating some 400 varieties of cannabis each. God knows how they do it. They spend those must be some heavy duty days to come up with the best cannabis grown this year in Northern California. So we're going to talk to the judges, two of my favorite judges there, on the next episode. I'm not going to tell you anything more, but if you want to hear how they survive this arduous task, please tune in. Thanks so much for listening. Come back again. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Brave New Weed podcast. This episode and all future episodes are made possible by amazing listeners like yourself. If you like what you've heard, we encourage you to show your support by giving $1 a month for special access and rewards on patreon.com/bravenewweed. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram via @bravenewweed. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/bravenewweed. And remember, you can always find more information about us or information discussed in each episode by pointing your favorite browser to bravenewweed.com.